Ago. We haven't had a power outage for more than
All right,
15
mics
minutes.
on, everyone. The time is 7:31. I call the February 18th meeting of Yardley Borough Council to order. Please rise for the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Manager Johnson is ill this evening, so I will just real quickly do roll call here. Starting down here, Mr. Stump.
Present?
Thank you. Mr. Carlson.
Here.
Mr. Feiner.
Present.
I am present. Ms. Susan Morris. Present. Ms. Scherer. Mr. Applebaum.
Here.
With 7 members present, we have a quorum. And a reminder to everyone to turn your microphones on so that you can be heard by our folks at home. Any community announcements this evening? I will start. We were very happy to receive an email this week from Rick Deal, who is a state hazard mitigation officer with PEMA. He reached out to Paula Johnson and Susan Mezzatelli to ask for the borough's approval to use our elevation applications that we submit for our Yardley Borough residents as the example for how municipalities complete their FEMA Go application, since Yardley Borough has been such a shining example of mitigation successes and applications for the elevation program in the Commonwealth. So this is a program, I know it's had its hiccups in recent years, but it is overwhelmingly a very positive program that we are very proud to offer our residents and very honored to receive funds from PEMA and FEMA for. So we were very glad and proud to receive that notification. We did give our approval for them to use our application as an example. Any other community announcements this evening?
Yes, I think this is a community announcement. So I wanted to follow up on our application through the EAC for being a bird town. And I have here a quick letter I'll read, if you don't mind. It says, and I'll introduce Julie Passini, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Dear Ms. Passini, on behalf of Birdtown, Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania Audubon Council, we are delighted to congratulate the borough on being accepted to our Birdtown program. We are excited to note that you are the 76th Birdtown. You can applaud if you want. All right. I won't read everything and just say that, just to sum it up, it says that we've enjoyed learning about your thoughtful plans to work with various organizations, to engage with students, hold a native garden tour, bird walks, creative native plant demonstration, gardens, and more. These future conservation actions will certainly have positive impacts throughout your community and help create a healthier environment for birds, wildlife, and all. And then, if I may take a few more seconds, I wanted to introduce Julie Passini because she is one of the people that helped get this done. And I wanted to also mention that this is one of the initiatives that we've been able to complete in short order through our newly reinvigorated Environmental Advisory Commission. So I thank you so much for that, and I can tell that this the EAC is going to be very successful. So may I introduce Ms. Passini?
Welcome. Would you like to come forward and say a few words?
You need to state my name and address.
Yes, please.
Hi, Julianne Passini, 132 South Main Street. Thank you, David, and obviously thank you as well for all your help and the partnership that we've formed to make this happen. It's fantastic, and I think it'll be wonderful, not only from the perspective of the fact that we get a couple signs to put outside somewhere in the borough to recognize this, but we're also going to be doing a lot of things with the community and involving people in different aspects and maybe that they're used to seeing. So I think that that'll be lovely. And we also have a group of people that is multifaceted. So I kind of represent the bird end of it. I know Elizabeth and Patty and John, of course, have fantastic gardens that I think they're looking forward to kind of educating the public on, especially around native planting and how that affects the habitat here in the borough. As part of this, Heidi Shriver, who is the president of PA Birdtown, would like to essentially present at one of our council meetings. She would do like a brief talk, I believe, and then of course kind of a commemorative ceremony for us to present the signage as well. I think the date we're looking at potentially would be the 18th of March, if that would be okay with council.
Sure, sounds great to us.
Okay, so I'll let her know that and we'll coordinate and I'll keep David on all emails with her so he's aware of it too
Yeah,
then.
so Councilperson Applebaum, just forward the request to Manager Johnson to be on the agenda for the 18th, and you'll be all set.
Okay,
Thank you so much for coming and for your service. We're excited to be at Birdtown, and please let us know and let Councilperson Applebaum know what council can do to support this initiative and make sure it's successful.
Absolutely.
Wes Forker behind you manages the events calendar, so as you plan events and education for the community, we can pop those onto the events calendar and make sure we are, blasting it in email and on Facebook, however we can help.
oh,
make
that'd be
this a
wonderful.
success.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you all.
Any other community announcements this evening about upcoming events? First from Councilor to the Mayor. Any community announcements from the public this evening? Okay, hearing none, we will move on to public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public can approach, state their name and address, and address matters not on the agenda. We ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes per matter. Any public comment this evening? Going once, going twice. All right, public comment closed. We'll next consider the consent agenda dated February 18th, 2025. It includes 2 items: approval of minutes dated February 4th, 2025, and designation of agent FEMA for 2025 project. Does anyone wish to remove an item from the consent
Yes,
agenda?
Madam President, the minutes, if I may.
Sure, so we will vote on these 2 items separately then. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes dated February 4th first?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Motion was made by Councilperson Shara, seconded by Councilperson Siegel Morris. Discussion from council
On the first one?
on the minutes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, on page, let's see, I think it's page 2 of the minutes. It says a vote was held and motion passes 7-0 regarding the chief's, about the, I guess it was about the officer. As you may realize that Councilman Stump was not here, so it'd be probably 6-0.
Yes, I will have that corrected. Thank you. Good
And
catch.
I think that is it.
Anything else on the minutes before we vote? Any questions or comments from the public on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously.
Oh.
Next,
I probably should have abstained since I'm not here, so put me as an abstention.
sure. So the vote passes 6-0-1. Thank you, Mr. Stump. Designation of agent for FEMA 2025 project. Is there a motion?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Finer. Discussion? So we are authorizing Paula Johnson, Borough Manager, on behalf of Yardley Borough for this. Questions or comments from council? From the public? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. All right, you have before you the finance report dated February 18th. Any issues or questions? Otherwise, it will be accepted by consensus. All right, I will turn it over first to Public Works, and the first item under Public Works is a sewer authority capital project update. Who is taking this one?
I will.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson.
The Yardley Sewer Authority is about to undertake big capital improvements. They've been long overdue. So I asked them to, I'm the liaison to them, so that's why I'm involved. I've asked them to come present to us tonight quickly, just a couple pages on what it's all about, and talk a little bit about how we'll communicate it to the public, as this will be ongoing for probably the next year. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Brian. You're going to lead this? Or Carl?
I'll just
Carl?
introduce everybody here.
Yeah. If you can come up to there, because that way people at home can hear you, hear
And
whoever's
you're
talking.
welcome to pull up additional chairs and pass the mic around.
Yeah.
So I'm Carl Perella, and I'm the current chairman of the YBSA. And you probably heard about our capital project we're going to do. It's quite a big project. That's going to go up on the screen here in a minute, the path of it, which basically goes from East College Avenue through town, and it makes its way to the bottom of West College Avenue and Sandy Run Road. So a while back, through televised,
Pause, Mr. Perla, real quick. If folks are looking for a copy of this on their computers, we did receive it from Patty Sargent. It's the email that says council meeting tonight, 7:30, and it's the second attachment if you'd like to zoom in at all on your own computer. Please continue, sorry.
that's okay. A while back, we found through televising that there was a deficiency in one of the sewer mains, was the diameter was undersized at peak flows, so we put a moratorium on it that particular time. I can't recall the year that happened. So we've been putting together a plan to replace that whole run that I just spoke of, and this is going to be joint use facilities, so this will be shared cost with Aqua, who handles Lower Makefield. We've secured our easements. We're ready to send it out to bid. You'll see the map up here now. And I'm going to introduce our engineer, Brian Brochon, who is going to speak about the project in more detail. We also have Barry Shower from the Sewer Authority. We have Alex Dyke with Boucher and James, Boucher and James. That was a Freudian slip. Gilmore and Associates. Carol Schultz, Christine Ventresca.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you. Please.
Thanks, Carl. Good evening. I'm Brian Brochon with Gilmore and Associates. We're the consulting engineer for Yardley Borough Sewer Authority. So, just going to give you a rundown, some background, project description, anticipated timeline on the project itself, and I believe, and this is the mapping of the sewer route you see in red. So just to give you some background on the project's to increase the sewage conveyance capacity of the interceptor lines to the Yardley Pump Station, which is located down on Delaware Avenue. So notably, this will be along the Buck Creek sewer interceptor and the Brock Creek sewer interceptors. And then there's a small section from Delaware Ave up to College to Longshore. So as Carl alluded, these are joint use facilities. So they convey sewage, which is coming from both Lower Makefield Township and Yardley Borough. And I believe, as you know, Aqua PA now owns the sewer system in Lower Makefield Township. So this will be additional lines, sewer lines, to increase the sewage conveyance capacity. That's generally to address current and future flows and to address historic wet weather surcharges that have been experienced from inflow and infiltration into the system, which occurs during wet weather events. The basis of the project is the 2015 Sewage Transportation Agreement, which is between the Yardley Borough Sewer Authority and Lower Makefield Township. Both parties saw the need for the additional capacity in these joint use lines. So they, prepared this agreement. Is basically an amendment to previous intermunicipal agreements between the two. So, it was, excuse me, so that's the basis of the project. Both sides, agreed that, it was time, to address these undersized sewer lines. So going back to now the description of the project, there will be 2 construction contracts. And if you could flip back to the map, if you don't mind, sorry about that. So the first sewer construction contract, if you can see at the top of the screen where it says the pump station there. So the start of the first contract is along College Ave, to a portion to the pump station, and then also from the pump station traveling all the way up towards Main Street. And the dividing line between the 2 construction contracts is basically at Yardley Friends Meeting. It's along the Buck Creek right there. So that's the end of Contract 1 and the beginning of Contract 2. Contract 2 then travels up along the Buck Creek and then travels basically to the Yardleyville Shopping Center at the turn behind there, and then travels across Afton all the way up to the end of the line along on Brock Creek, sorry. And that is where Lower Makefield Township, one of their discharge points from Lower Makefield Township comes into the Yardley Boroughs system. So that's the extent of the project. It's approximately 6,000 linear feet of new sewer lines. They're 15-inch and 16-inch in diameter. The majority of the sewer lines will be constructed in parallel to existing sewer lines. Those existing sewer lines will remain in service, stay active, and the new sewer lines will create the additional capacity. There are a couple areas within the project, due to constraints where, it was not feasible to provide a parallel sewer. So there's areas where the existing sewer line is going to be replaced and upsized by a larger sewer line. At this time, all the easements have been acquired by Yardley Borough Sewer Authority, and all of the affected properties where there will be actual construction work, those folks have been aware of the project for a few years now at this point, as we work through the easement process. As far as restoration of disturbed surfaces will be done to pre-existing conditions or better. The affected roadways will be milled and overlaid at the end of the project. The total estimated costs at this time for the 2 construction contracts is estimated at about $4.5 million. And the project costs, will be shared by both Yardley Borough Sewer Authority and Lower Makefield Township. And that's based on the cost-sharing percentages that are outlined in the sewage transportation agreement, which I mentioned earlier. The majority of the project will be borne by, the cost will be borne by Lower Makefield Township, based on the agreement. And then finally, Gilmore and Associates will be the provide construction administrative services as well as on-site construction observation on behalf of the authority. And then as far as the timeline for the project, we're planning on going out for public bids next month in March, going through the public bidding process with the anticipation of awarding the construction contracts in April, and then basically having a year-long construction project till final completion. So those are the main points that I'd like to present. If anyone has any questions, feel free. Sure.
So you said that the total cost or estimated cost, construction cost is $4.5 million for 2 construction contracts. I'm trying to understand, I guess, a couple things, because I'm not familiar how the sewer board works exactly. So is there money in their budget to cover any of this, or is this coming out of a different fund?
So, if you want me to speak for that, or?
The Yardley Borough Sewer Authority has all the funds to pay for Yardley's share.
Do we know what the percent, using the percentage, what that is at this $4.5 million total cost of the two projects?
I'm sorry, Alex Dyke with Gilmore, I work with Brian. I was involved in writing the agreement, so I have a little more familiarity with the details. But the cost sharing is such that the authority's portion of the estimated $4.5 million would be about $700,000.
Okay.
Just for the purposes of the record, from the public, we had comment that the total cost will be carried by Yardley Borough Sewer Authority. They do have the funds on hand to cover it, and it will be about $700,000 out of the $4.5 million.
My second question is about the construction. You said it's a year-long project approximately?
Yes.
And this area that you have mapped here, what kind of disruption do you foresee when you're doing a project like this?
And I have a quick, if I may add, just a specific question to that disturbance question. Do any trees need to be cut down?
Yes, there will be some tree clearing, primarily along the Buck Creek line, towards the bottom of the screen on there. There will be tree clearing for the easements and sewer construction.
And will they be replanted?
No, that's not the intent.
The tree clearing will be along the alignment of the sanitary sewer within the easement, within the permanent easement. And as is the case with all public sanitary sewer, those easements have to remain clear to protect the sewer and to allow access for operation maintenance.
So they're currently overgrown.
Some of them are, yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Well, I would just say, just because Julie's here, to mention that the EAC and I believe you're the Shade Tree Committee liaison, we probably should just, just have a look-see and see if there's other things that we can do to beautify it if you're going to be cutting down some trees. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just, because these people are in the room, I'm just making a recommendation.
Measures to limit tree disruption wherever possible.
Yeah, thank you. But then, as far as the disruption, you didn't really answer that question.
Oh, I didn't get to it yet, sorry.
Fine.
So basically along the verge, so down Delaware Avenue, it'll be a one-lane flagging. The roads will not be closed down. They'll have to allow traffic past, with a one-lane flagging operation. Obviously, with any type of construction project, there's going to be, some inconvenience with, obviously with traffic. There's, no way around doing that when you're digging up the road. And then most of the project, outside of Delaware Avenue and Afton is then mostly off-road area through easements. The other street will be heavily affected is Brown Street, from, I guess it's Morgan Avenue towards the canal. And then we're going to have a trenchless installation underneath the canal and the Brock Creek over to the other side of the property.
Could you explain that? I'm not sure
Now,
what a trend.
so it's as opposed to most construction for utility pipeline is an open cut, installation. So they dig down, place the pipe down and then backfill. So from the other side of the canal and the Buck Creek over into Brown Street, basically a large boring rig to drill subsurface below, and then we'll have a casing pipe and then the carrier pipe, which, will convey the sewage, will be inside of that pipe. And then as well, we will have a trenchless installation from the Friends Meeting House side over in across the road so that Main Street is not disturbed as well. Realizing that all the new improvements that had been done with the roadway and the sidewalks and
Yeah.
and everything over there. So
Along those lines, I just would like to bring your attention to, I don't know if you are aware that one of our recently acquired properties is what we call Judy's Garden, is right there, and this runs through that property. So
yes, it's alongside of an existing stormwater easement is where our sewer line is.
Right.
Yes, we did a lot of design around that property.
yeah.
With the homeowner
Right.
prior to.
Sure.
Prior to him, I guess, conceding and decided he was not going to develop and
Yeah.
provided the property to the borough, so yes.
So we have some plans for that property, and it'd be great to, to just get communication with you as far as of any trees or any just disruptions, so we don't have to
Yes.
do
Yeah,
and
that's-
redo something.
Yeah, that's part of the part of the project. There will be minimal disruption. I mean, there's going to be some mobilization during construction work. We have acquired easements through there for temporary construction, but
So not only the borough-owned property that I'm concerned about, but this council has received accurate critique in the past that we have under-notified our residents about projects that impact their houses, if not directly, then indirectly. What is the plan to notify residents, and can we over-notify, since this has possible impacts in a lot of different areas for our residents, from disruption to sewer potentially, if there's an issue to disruption to their, commutes or their property? Is there a plan for that?
I can help speak to that, and I know that we've talked about it on the authority side of the board. I know one of the reasons they were anxious to come here and talk to you was to open those lines of communication. But we, with Gilmore, will keep the authority and the authority staff and their board appraised, updated, and with notice to them, advance notice to them. I know they have, and Christine now has a relationship with Paula, and will be very proactive and interactive as we go. Contractors have certain leeway to make their own schedules, but we will hold them to providing advanced schedules and letting us know when those change, if they must, due to weather or what other conditions, and put that information out there as well. I think it'll be more up to Christine, Paula, and the staff to decide exactly the means of how that's distributed, via social media, website, et cetera. I imagine it's going to be a combination of those things. But that's our intent going in as the engineers and managing the construction contract.
But you can provide us a list of the actual property addresses associated with from the GIS data or something like that? Okay, that would be great.
I mean, I think we want to know the properties as well as, like what is going to happen on those properties in terms of temporary access to those locations.
Yeah, and we
Is,
have that property information now.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I would say whatever you think is the correct level for all of us. If we triple that, that's probably the correct level of communication. No one's going to complain if we over-communicated. That would be a good problem to have.
We had discussions on this topic, and this was the first piece of it. And so, because it's going to be a long time, and you have the sewer authority in the borough, as soon as chainsaw fires up on the first tree, people are going to be walking in downstairs, what's going on? So what we thought is we would put, obviously, this presentation out very prominent on our website. And then Christine will communicate together with Paula and Patty. So that we'll look at it in like 2-week blocks or something. So we're here, okay, it's August. It looks like we're going to be in the area near the pump house for the next month, and you're going to see this kind of construction, road work and tree removal or whatever it is, and then update that every couple of weeks so that we can point, we being downstairs, being Paula and Wes and everybody, can point people to, here's the project, why, and here's the relatively short term, what's happening, when things are going to happen. So that's the approach we thought made sense.
Will these be taking place in segments, or will this be all at the same time, or will it be one and then two, like the contracts?
So the So they will be simultaneous. So contract one
Okay.
will be going on at the same time as contract
Gotcha.
two. Now, potentially could be the same contractor, or it could be two separate contractors. There
Gotcha.
will be no preclusion from, you know,
Will they-
so if it's contractor is able to do both contracts at the same time, and they're, you know, awarded the contract, they it might be the same contractor working on both.
Will it be done in segments, or will there be a potential that we have Afton, Delaware,
So
Brown, all torn up at once?
generally, on a sewer project, you start at the low end and work your way up. So
Makes sense.
it's, because it's a gravity project, so.
Right.
We try not to start upstream and then have to worry about hitting.
Got it,
Or
got it.
elevations, those type of things. So generally, you start at the lowest point and work your way up from there.
Okay. So both contracts will be done simultaneously, but we're not going to be, all the red will not happen simultaneously, is
Correct.
what you're saying?
Yeah,
It'll be progressively up those lines. And-
Gotcha.
And then, by the way, since it was mentioned and there was an interest in the trenchless installation, that's something that's done by a separate specialty contractor. That's
Sure.
working for the main utility contractor. Timing-wise, that could have its own timeline, and then
Okay.
the utility contractor would tie into it. So that's something, just informationally, you might say where, no, it didn't progress linear, because that was
Right, right.
on its own schedule. But other than that, it generally, sewer construction, to Brian's point, works its way progressively upstream.
So it's kind of like how the College Avenue Bridge is being replaced by the county next year, but this past summer, they were doing boring work on it and it was shut down for 2 or 3 days. Like, there's going to be elements of that in this project as well, where, okay, now we need to do this before we can, so that makes sense.
Could you comment on why you made 2 phases of it? Is it different techniques, or why not one big project?
just to, for efficiency, for to have the project duration not as long, obviously, if it's one contractor, probably looking at a 2-year plus project.
It also
So,
opens up the
and
bidding
cost, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, it opens up the bidding to contractors who maybe are scaled better.
Yeah.
For just one of the 2 phases, and it makes it a little more honestly competitive, which is to the benefit of the authority and ratepayers.
This is, to my knowledge, the first project that we've done with cost sharing and joint decision-making. So I realize we're both paying for it, but it is completely within the borough. And what if we are unhappy with something and there's a change order that's going to cost a lot of money? Like, how does that decision-making work? Does it go to especially because we have a sewer authority and they have a private entity. How does that work?
Right, well, Aqua has to act within the scope of being an owner of a community sewer system. So, when they purchased Lower Makefield Township sewer system, inherited this agreement, this intermunicipal agreement that we have. That agreement does have terms for how improvement projects are handled, in the cost sharing, again, the percentages are laid out, but then the decision-making, basically, Yardley Borough Sewer Authority manages the project. There are certain points along the way where Aqua Lower Makefield has, the prerogative to, is entitled to see the information if there are changes, to comment. There's language in there, they can't arbitrarily, try to hold up the project or make unreasonable requests and so forth, and they generally have to collaborate. So there's language to that effect in the agreement that it provides for, it's an authority project. The authority manages it, as their engineers manage it on their behalf.
So on that note, with Aqua being a private entity, I would assume there's something in that agreement where, let's just say something needs to be done that's $500,000 that will protect them from being a private for-profit company from going, we're going to cut corners and not do the full amount there.
Right, again, we're managing the construction contract. They have their right to question things.
Gotcha.
Within reason. But, at the end of the day, they're obligated for the cost sharing that's in the agreement.
That makes sense. Another question on that. You gave the numbers, the 700K is what we're responsible for, but do you happen to know the percentage that Yardley Borough and Lower Makefield, just so I can write that down?
Roughly 84%.
8416?
84.6 or
84
something?
point something, and, in 15.
So 8416 is a fair number?
84.16.
Okay. Would
And
that,
that's based on the proportional share of capacity used in those lines by the two.
and would that be a percentage that's in play on any projects that we do, or just this one specifically?
It applies to all shared costs
Okay.
for the sewage conveyance through the borough, yes.
Sorry, I'm asking for my general knowledge, in addition to just this.
No, and for what it's worth, the authority had communications with the council back, as this thing was being put into place and so on, and we're happy to do it again. We know that they're in contact.
Do the permits that have been issued or applied for easements have been granted, but not permits yet? Or permits have?
We have permits in place.
And do those include E EPA?
Nothing with the EPA. It's through DEP.
Okay.
Through Department of Environmental Protection and PennDOT for, the Delaware Ave, Afton, and Main Street are state roads. So we have our permits for those, as well as, obviously, the state permits in place. County Conservation District, so.
Lots of streams impacted.
Hi. The existing pipes, if I understand this correctly, you said are going to run side by side in most cases?
Generally, yes.
Forever? Okay.
That's the intent as of right now, yes.
I mean, I know nothing lasts forever, but I
Right.
mean, in general principle. So my question is, because I am concerned about the environmental impact, or if there is potentially environmental impact, could any of those old pipes degrade any? I'm assuming you're doing this also in addition to increasing the volume, also because they're not in the best shape?
So
To address that.
there are, many of those lines have already been rehabilitated with cured-in-place lining systems. So those were done probably within maybe, I guess, 10 years. The authority was proactive in replacing many of the sewer line, slip lining is the general term, but it's
Okay.
cured-in-place pipeline, which basically it's a new pipeline within inside of the existing host pipe. So, yeah, a lot of the sewer lines have already been rehabbed. So,
So you're feeling-
they're in good shape for several years to come.
Several years?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it's,
Well, tens of years.
Oh, okay, I'm just trying
I
to,
mean,
Typically, the cured-in-place pipe has a similar lifespan to a new plastic pipe.
PVC pipe, yeah.
okay, so we should not be, I mean, we're always going to be concerned about environmental issues, but you're saying, based on your experience, that this will be something that we can be assured to some extent that those older pipes are not going to burst or break or cause a problem with sewage spewing out of them.
Can you ever know that ahead of time?
I didn't understand.
I said, can you ever know that ahead of time?
Well, no, but I'm just making the point that they're older, and that's why I was asking. But he said that they put in a liner, so I'm assuming then you're saying that it will last, you said tens of years.
Right,
Yeah.
right. The authority's going to continue to maintain those existing lines as they have. As needed, there will be rehabilitation, as has been already done.
Sure.
And so yeah.
Okay.
And if it seems odd to have, parallel pipes, it's not that uncommon.
Yeah.
It's referred to as a relief sewer typically, to provide the additional capacity without disturbing the existing sewer. Which, by the way, in some areas is very close to the creek. If we were to try to replace it, then we would be talking about those types of environmental impacts.
I appreciate the comments. Thank you.
For our members of the Sewer Authority who are here, you are in the weeds on this, you're subject matter experts, you've been living and breathing this. Is there anything we haven't asked or anything you'd like to share that would be helpful to this council? Any support you need from us at this time? This is hugely beneficial, and I'm grateful that we're having this time to go over it, but anything we're not asking that you would like to share?
How messy is it going to be?
I'm looking at Don. You've been in a number of our meetings, you've gotten a little bit familiar, you've gotten a little bit in the weeds with us.
That's right.
If there's anything I know you share with the.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think, the communication thing's key, and so that we can all both the sewer authority people and the council people can answer the questions as they come up from people. And so everybody will know ahead of time what's going on. I think that's key. You did say that in some cases you are going to actually replace, it's not going to be the parallel thing. In some places you're going to actually,
Yeah, we're going to remove the existing pipe and then right in its place, install a new larger section of pipe.
so explain to me that process. Assume you were doing that and
So-
there's 10 houses here who want to still.
Yeah, it's,
What do you do? It's temporary? How's that work?
it's, I believe only one house is affected by the one stretch that we're doing.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's,
Along Rock Creek, right, Brian?
yes, it's along Brock Creek, coming from this section through here. So the parking lot of the shopping center is there.
Yeah.
So it's a very tight space. So it's up to about right through here.
I see.
It's like the one house that's along after, who's actually physically connected in there. So that'll be down. We'll have the bypass pumping system, which takes the sewage out of the one manhole and travels around down to the bottom, downstream, so they can construct while that sewer line's out of service.
Okay, so understood.
What is the diameter of the existing pipes? Do you happen to know that?
Well, they range so down towards the pump station. So obviously they get larger as you get more flows.
Sure.
So the pump station, so down at the bottom of the pump station, I believe they're 22, starts at like 22 to 24 inch, somewhere in that range, back to 20 inch, and then maybe 18. I think the Brock Creek line might be about like 12 inch or something like that.
Right. And then the new ones, do you know that?
So they're generally all going to be 15 and 16 inch pipes. If it's PVC pipe, it's 15 inch. If it's ductile iron pipe, 16 inch.
Okay. So then in theory, we'll have basically be doubling the capacity because you have both of them running simultaneously, or is that?
It'll be available, yes. I mean, like, they're running in parallel. There's points where the two lines that are parallel will connect to each other
Okay.
at the same elevations, and allows for extra relief points. So the primary conduit will still be the existing pipes, but these pipes will be used, when demand calls for it.
Right. So the reason why I'm asking, and again, this is just what's popping into my head. This isn't about hounding anybody. A year and a half ago, when we had the large floods, this is outside of our jurisdiction, but I was personally on site and was involved in helping some of the families that were impacted in Mapleville. And one of the issues there was a sewer pipe broke and actually then caused a sinkhole that took people's backyards with it. And what I heard just kind of through the grapevine was that the sewer pipes hadn't really been touched since the 60s and they were too small for the amount of stuff that's being put through them. So here's what I'm asking is, in doing all this stuff, that's in theory, obviously we can't predict the future, but it would potentially prevent things like that from happening in the event of a flash flood?
Yeah, I can't speak to, I don't know
Okay.
what exactly happened.
Councilperson Scherer's point earlier, we can't specifically predict the future, but I think it would be fair to say that we're reducing the.
We're reducing the risk. Okay.
To the best, reasonable ability that we have now.
And part of the reason why I ask that is because when people complain about this long, ongoing process and, well, why do we have to do this? I can't see the tangible results of it. That's a talking point that there is an element, like when you don't do this, there is the potential for really bad things to happen, and then everybody gets mad and goes, why wasn't this done? So I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't pulling that out of the air before I utilize that talking point. So thank you for that.
Any other questions from council? If you don't mind, I'd like to give the public the opportunity to ask any questions that you have. Yes, Mr. Forker.
I'm not familiar with the trenchless aspect of the job, so when that occurs, is anything felt above ground? Like, what I'm wondering about along the creek, will the creek notice any disturbance when you're boring underneath it, or the canal?
I mean,
You have that as a jack and bore, right?
it's open to
Yeah,
It's- yeah,
so
we-
it's either gonna be a horizontal directional drill or a
jack and bore.
at the discretion of the bidding contractor.
Right.
Either way, it's a drilling process. It's not a, you know, it should not be, it's not a impact or a, you know, it's certainly an excavation-based process. So to your point, the vibrations, there will be some, but they will be minimal. They'll be clear of the canal vertically, so there's no anticipated impact. And that's obviously a big driver in why it was designed that way. It's not obviously more expensive, and you don't do the whole job that way, but it's intended to minimize the impact of the canal. The drilling process, you're either drilling or pushing the casing through, or you're drilling and pulling the pipe through.
Main Street too. Yeah, I'm just looking, by the
Main
Friends
Street.
meeting, you're gonna go underneath the bridge there, and then follow the creek around and go underneath the canal, correct? I'm just picturing where the sewer manholes are.
In which portion?
From North Main Street
Yes.
to the canal.
Right there, yep.
This will be trenchless across the street.
Okay,
And then from the point back in here,
crossing the creek.
crossing the creek and the canal into,
Right.
into Brown Street.
Whereabouts on Brown Street do you come back up?
We come in somewhere in the center is the,
Right at Edgewater or?
it's past Edgewater. Coming down into Brown, probably about halfway up.
Okay,
And yes, that's arguably going to be the tightest part of the job.
yeah.
Yeah,
And those pipes there are really deep.
Yeah, and it's gonna, and where exactly we come up is gonna depend on that, whether it's a jack and bore or a directional drill. Because with a
Okay.
jack and bore, you have pits on either end, you have a launching pit and a receiving pit. Whereas with a horizontal directional, it's from the surface to the surface, and then you dig down at either end. So it'll change slightly, you know, we have it designed with target areas for those, but it'll change slightly based on how the contractor works.
So when you do this, is there any need to contact DCNR because you're going underneath the canal or anything like that?
Yeah, so we went through permitting with that, because they did ask about vibrations and
Yeah,
whatnot,
yeah.
with disturbance of the canal, so yes.
Okay.
Yeah, went through the, Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, all
Yeah,
the, all the
yeah,
different,
yeah, I'm familiar with that.
different entities, so.
But what I'm really curious about is the vibrations at the North Main Street Bridge area, because there's a retaining wall there. And I'm just wondering if that's going to feel the vibration.
Yeah, we're further
It's right
down.
across the- it's-
Yeah.
We're
we're down, further, way down.
It's down.
down further?
Here's
Okay.
the bridge, here's where the,
Okay.
Turn
Goes-
with the bridge
we're
then, right?
down, crossing this.
It's going like in front of the Friends meeting and then going under Main Street.
Yeah.
Further down down the Friends meeting,
Okay.
probably between the loop
Yeah.
of the
that's-
driveway.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
So the pipes are going to go down under the canal, which is where the existing sewer pipe already is, correct?
Yes, there's existing pipes that
Gotcha.
cross
Is
cross
this-
the creek and the canal.
It's going to require the canal to be drained.
No,
So we don't have to drain the canal
no,
when
we're
we're
trenchless,
Oh.
that's what,
wonderful.
we're coming
Wonderful.
through the ground, yeah.
We just went through like a year and a half of PR stuff on the canal, so I'm glad that we're not going to have to explain to people why the canal's empty again for another year.
That would be
It'll
very,
be empty
very
for other
disruptive
reasons.
to try to dig, open trench through there.
All right. Good stuff. Thank you so much. Any last questions? All right, so Manager Johnson will receive a list of affected properties from you all, and we'll work on the notification to residents sooner rather than later. And I think those are our actions immediately, but, yeah, keep the lines of communication open. Thank you so much for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have just one last question. Is there if we award the bids in April 25, it says here construction completion summer 2026, do we have an anticipated start date? Or is it based on the contracts and,
So generally,
even if it's
a
ballpark?
notice to proceed is generally, once we award contracts, they have to go through getting all the paperwork, the bonds and all
Right,
stuff
right, of
in,
course.
which wind up taking generally about a month. And so
But we already
then we
have,
give a notice to proceed, which winds up being generally about a month after, after the award of contract.
So we're looking at probably summer 25 to summer 26-ish.
Yeah, so late,
We're not gonna hold you to it.
late spring, early summer to next summer.
And you mentioned all the permits are already in place, so like Ori with the sidewalk, there's a part of it that we're dependent on PennDOT's review. That's not gonna, there's not factors like that. Those have all already been acquired.
We've gotten our HOPs, our highway
Wonderful.
occupancy permits for all the state roads.
Perfect.
Yep.
This is good.
Ready, shovel ready.
So,
Okay?
okay?
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for that.
All right. Yep. So, Public Works has a update on public work things.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, what happened? I can't find it.
This will be that other. This is a discussion. What's that? You can start, yeah. Thanks. Okay, what page before that? Yeah, that's it. Okay, Public Works. What I wanted to do is share with you some of the items that has been on our agenda at Public Works that we've been discussing, because it's a good amount of items. And I'll update you on some of these as we go through this. And it's not everything. There's some things, actually missing. But this is the main stuff that I think is interesting for discussion or for questions. One, of course, our big project of the year is the North Main Street Sidewalk Phase 3, and that did get, I spoke to Pat today, and that did get submitted to PennDOT. There were some further issues they had to work on there with design. The main challenge with that one is because the street slopes down to a lot of the houses on North Main Street as you go further north, and that creates a complexity because the sidewalk has to be straight. So you could have a sidewalk that goes like this, because then if somebody was like on a wheelchair, let's say, or in a walker, they have a likelihood of falling over. So there's, I think it's a 2% limit of sideways grading you can have. So what happens if you do that is then you have this drop off to some of those driveways. So that had to be designed in and figured out, and it's going to necessitate working like up to the right of way, and we're going to be getting some documents to go out and go over that with some residents who are affected by that to make sure that everything is clean and they're on board and they understand what's happening. It's really important for that project. So that's where that project is at. And Pat told me that recently they've been responding in less than 30 days. So hopefully that will continue. We should be hearing imminently, getting the go-ahead to do that. But in the meantime, as soon as Paula's back, we're going to coordinate with her going over to those houses and getting the residents on board with those specific tweaks. Next thing is Yardley Borough Trailhead. We've been speaking to Parks and Rec about adding a bike stand and potentially benches. But there's also an amenities grant that we're going to apply for that we discovered. That's a pretty easy grant to apply for. It doesn't even require, it should be no cost because we basically can do it in-house with their help. So then we have Judy's Garden. And for that one's interesting because we actually already have essentially a design that we can use. So we want to minimize any additional costs with that. And I think we need to break that down to a few phases because we have a statue that has to go in there. We have to look at what are the right phases to break that down and what we can get done initially and what would have to be done later. The Doleton Sidewalk Extension, we have an application in for that, but we know that we're going to need additional funding to be able to pay for the design aspect. So that needs to be secured when we have that request. And then, so that's waiting on that. But in the meantime, I should mention also for the public that the sidewalk that's going to go on North Main Street where Dolington is, that's part of the North Main Street sidewalk project. The part that's part of the extension is flashing beacons to be able to cross that crosswalk more safely. So it's kind of like part two, but it really is in many ways the last section of the North Main Street sidewalk. Then there's the Borough Hall roof redo. Again, we're waiting for the grant that we applied for. If we don't get that grant because of the situation with the roof here, we're going to have to figure out another way to deal with redoing it. Another project that has been brought up here at various times in the past, but we're actively looking into, is the four-way pedestrian walk on Main and Afton, which means someone presses the button to cross the street, and then because of the weird juxtaposition of that intersection, there's always going to be a blind spot. And so the way that's been dealt with in some areas is to have the light be a walk signal in all directions instead of just one direction. And then people can cross this way, that way, or diagonally. And then when they're done, it goes to, goes back to regular automobile traffic. There's the Afton Avenue Sidewalk Design Planning Grant. We want to get that in this year. That's important to get that project moving, because that project is going to take years. You can just tell by the complexity of it. So you've got to start somewhere. Another one is taking initial steps to figure out what it would take to acquire the train station property through there are two different grants, one to buy property and one to acquire trails on properties, right away for a trail. This property is probably more appropriate for just acquiring it outright, since there's no other real purpose for the property. And so there's a process of communicating with the current owner, which I think is the family of the last person I was communicating with about this, and working to work out a price and then applying for a grant for it. I think we'd be at a high likelihood of getting that grant. We want to get that started this year. Crosswalks, we've brought these up before. We would like to bring in, just get everyone in sync with what the modern standards are for safe crosswalks. I think it's useful for us to all be on the same page about that. And there's been a lot of work done by PennDOT and, transportation departments all over the country in that area. And also, I think we started a project, although we got busy with other things, to inventory crosswalks, especially the ones that need repair, and look into where do people want more crosswalks. Like Yardley Commons is one area that comes up, and anywhere else that we feel that there's a need. There are some areas that there's a need, and there's a challenge in doing them, like mid-block crossing on Main Street because of the limitations of PennDOT. But it's still something that we don't want to take off the radar. Before I do the last one, there's also drainage along, it's not on here, but figuring out how to get funded to fix the drainage once and for all along the Yardley Borough Trailhead. So this final item here, Complete Streets Vision Zero, is not something I've spoken to the council about. We've only spoken about that in our small committee meetings, but I just want to give you a heads up on that one because that's an interesting one. If you could just go to the next slide. So what are these things? So Complete Streets is a concept where when you design streets, roads, or redesign or rebuild, you account for the needs of all users of a street. So it used to be that streets were like, there was Main Street was a dirt road and you had horses there where you had a trolley. And then cars came along, we designed everything for cars. And now the thinking is really about, well, who's using the street? Vehicles, pedestrians, children are using it, elderly people are using it, people with wheelchairs, people with strollers, bicycles, et cetera. And so you want to balance, especially in a small borough, you want to balance the streets so that all of the users of that street can exist in harmony together. And the goal is to reduce conflicts and increase integration and harmony between all the users. So this has been done like around the country. Big cities like Philadelphia have done this, and really small rural towns have done this. And what you do is different for each town. And your goal is higher quality of life through safety, calmer traffic. And it's not even always just streets or crosswalks. It could be as simple as when people walk in a certain place, they have a lack of shade because there are no trees. And so you add trees. So there's a lot of thinking about the holistic approach to what is it like to exist in the borough, whether you're driving or walking or biking or wheeling or whatever you're doing, to have a good experience. And so So that's what Complete Streets is, and I'll get back to why that's important in a moment. Let's go on to the next slide. This is a counterpart to Complete Streets is Vision Zero, where you have a goal that no one should die or suffer serious injury on our streets or our roads. And you want to increase safe, healthy, equitable mobility.
We can be unanimous on, Mr. Finer.
Yeah, these are not controversial. And I'll get to why I bring it up. Okay, I don't expect to have a lot of opposition to that. But, and a lot of towns and cities have done this around the country. But what it means, what both of these things mean, we can go to the next slide. So what you'll do is simply, as a municipality, is you pass a resolution that you are a municipality that supports Complete Streets and that you support Vision Zero. It's two separate resolutions. And once you do that, you're proclaiming that this is something that is important to this community. And it means that we look at projects from the lens of all of the users for Complete Streets and to promote safety. Where that's helpful is when you say that, when you apply for a grant and you, let's say you apply for a grant for a sidewalk and you say that you are a Complete Streets Vision Zero community, it gives more strength to your application because of that. And there are grants that specifically are earmarked for these types of communities. One example I saw, which is very interesting, was a design grant and there's a nonprofit group that will go into your town and you get a grant to pay the group, and the group then does a study of your town and figures out which of these things are actionable and applicable to the way that your town is being used. So that would be helpful because it's more of a macro perspective. Instead of us sort of winging it and getting like bits and pieces here and there, we can really have a long-term idea of what makes the most sense to implement here in Yardley. And I think it does. It's a quality of life thing that fits in with the blue zones and just a desire for well-being in our communities. We want people to be encouraged to walk around, to get out of their cars a little bit and enjoy the beautiful place that we live in, because it is beautiful.
How's this fixed parking? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, well, it does if people feel less need to drive and they walk. When the sidewalk was put in, for me, like being somewhere where there was no sidewalk, I make it a point to always walk down to the borough, to the heart of Yardley.
Right.
And I didn't before, so I'm a personal example of it. So this is something we're looking into, researching, and we'll look into what it would take to have a resolution for both of these items. All right, and that wraps it up. Any questions on anything?
Yes.
Yeah.
You had on there initial steps for train station property, trail acquisition, contact current owners, research apply. Have we discussed that before? Huh?
It has been discussed for ever since, I would say, the first I heard of this was my first term on council on the start of 2014, but this was talked about before that, so I kind of came into a conversation. So it's been kicked around, and the planning committee, it's in our comprehensive plan of 2014, and in fact, recently when we had, I think when maybe you may have heard about it mentioned, is when we had the discussion about the service center there, and there was talk about,
Oh, okay. see.
accessing that pathway.
Okay.
So to clarify, Mr. Finer, for the public, anybody watching at home, this is the very small strip of basically undevelopable land between the Yardley Service Center and the railroad bridge over Main Street. There's a very narrow strip of land there. This isn't the actual train station property where septic is.
No. What it is that it would connect the train station through a trail. You have you have South Main Street, the train station, and through a trail you would connect to the
Tow Canal. Yep.
Yeah, and the canal. So that is also a very attractive project from the ability to fund a project like that through grants. It's very attractive because you're connecting mass transit to a state park. Yeah, and people. I mean, it's just those types of interconnections are high value, and of course, you don't know what the homeowner thinks the property is worth, but since you can't really do anything with that property, I would imagine they might be happy to not pay taxes on it and kind of put it to some good use. We've had success with non-developable properties in the past, like the Ardley Trailhead. So this is a potential property of that nature.
So I think Michelle, in talking about it in a working
No, when
session.
I read it, it sounded like it was the other side. No,
Oh,
it
okay.
sounded like it was the other side, at the train station, not, the way
Oh,
it's
to-
written is. it
Sorry.
doesn't sound-
Oh, train station. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that's
But I think
true.
just for an abundance of clarity, before Public Works would contact the owners, that would definitely be a decision made by council. I think it's just helpful for Public Works at this point to hear any feedback on prioritization of that, or whether that's something we are into or not. I've always liked that idea personally, but again, depends on the.
Yeah, I mean, I think for like, I would love to get, since we're all here now, if people would agree for us to just pursue contact with the current owner and find out what their interests.
Shouldn't we know whether you can actually put a trail there? Like what, already right now, I would say that it's a habitat for animals, right? Animals use that area to get from one side of Main Street, and then cut through to the canal. I mean, I see them, I live in the Commons. Also, if you're gonna put a path there, like what are you planning, like a path or a sidewalk? Because again, I'm loath to see old growth trees cut down to make a path for people. Like when animals and birds, or for Bird Town USA, already live there. So I would like to know whether, also because it runs along the train track, is it feasible to put something there? Do they have an easement? What kind of fencing or protection will we need for people? So before we pursue maybe acquiring it, can we actually do anything with it?
I think to Mr. Finer's point, though, if we go to them and say, would you sell us this? And they say, absolutely not, we don't need to waste any time doing any of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I thought there's a simple thing to do is to see what the situation with the current ownership is, and if there's interest, it's an inquiry.
And say, hey, can I take some pictures of your property so that we can really look at it at council and know what we're talking about?
Further, I believe that if the the property owner was willing to, sell it for
$1.
$1,
Yeah.
then that would add to some of the, even if we don't end up making a trail, that would add to some of the protections that you're talking about, Ms. Morris Siegel, because, it's nice to be able to control that.
Yeah, and just so, I mean, I think a lot of the work was done, so the first thing is to, to understand that this isn't something new. I think that the idea of putting a trail in, it's everything I've ever heard about it and read about it is about the idea of like a, towpath style trail. It's not like a concrete, it's not disruptive. The idea is to be in keeping with the environment, not
I don't think I
disrupt
heard
it.
you say, would you mind elaborating on, and I know what the answer is, but the value of this project? Because you didn't talk about why we would want to do this in the first place.
Well, just in terms of the interconnection, the trail system,
Yeah.
linking mass transit to a state park, having residents in the south end of the borough have a nice way to get, because right now you have to kind of go around and you go through where the water tower is, and it's not really a nice way to get to the towpath. So I think there's a lot of benefit of the interconnected nature of trails. People support trails. I mean, I think if we look for, like, this could be a problem, that could be a problem, what's the point of doing anything? Because there's always going to be problems. But I think that those problems that you're bringing up, I mean, I would happy to be working with you and with Public Works to resolve them. But I would hope that you would be on the side of acquiring another trail and open space. Well, if I could just finish the open space for the community, because most people are in favor of more open space that's protected, right?
I just am in favor of keeping old growth trees, habitat.
Sure.
And any noise buffer between me and the train station.
Yeah, I think that's very much in keeping with what everything I've ever heard about the vision for this. And I think that those are important things.
Borough Hall roof, we had emailed a little bit about like a little subcommittee just to focus on Borough Hall. I've been noticing recently driving past it, the windows are looking really, like they need to be scraped and painted or something soon. We're probably losing a lot of heat out of them. So just like a committee that hyper focuses on our building and taking care of it. So I don't know if that's something that Public Works would be supportive of. And just something, again, like we did with the elevation committee, we just formed something that would sprint for a year and just apply for all the grants and get things moving, and then they could dissolve. But I definitely think that's something we should move forward with.
Now, maybe consider also like including the annex in that because, you know, just the borough buildings.
Borough buildings, yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Quick question?
Yeah.
On the trailhead, you talk about, I remember hearing you say that Parks and Rec would like to work with us on the bike stand and benches, and was that a dollar amount or just they were going to purchase it?
There is a dollar amount, I believe, $2,500, if I recall. Mm-hmm. Caroline, do you remember you were on that?
That sounds right to me.
So it's whatever, you know, we don't know exactly the costs of putting those things and installing them in a way that is compatible with where that is, and the requirements. And
There's been some discussion, because I think it's inter-committee, inter-commission type things that could be discussed, and we were talking in the EAC about this as well. So if, and I know we're going to talk about it because I'm on the committee, but, you know, as things develop, maybe we could see how other committees or people that can help find resources, in addition to the grants, to help out.
yeah, I mean, that would be great. I think that once we know exactly what we're getting from Parks and Rec, we can then go and work and get other sources. And I'm pretty confident we'll be able to raise the money from the other sources as well. I don't know about the timing of it. I think those are pretty quick, but you know, we're in February, so you know, the idea of, hey, we'll have a big ribbon cutting in like April. I don't know if it's going to be quick, but sooner the better.
Coming up.
Yeah.
All righty.
All right.
Anything else? Otherwise, thank you so much, Public Works, Mr. Finer.
Thank you.
All righty. Moving on to our last item, public safety event permit ordinance, please.
Are we having that? Oh, okay. Well, we have the whole big ordinance up there. Perfect. Not my little, I have many PowerPoint talking notes, so I'll just go over those. So, Public Safety have been working on putting together a draft of the ordinance. So this, up on the screen, is a draft of the entire ordinance, but basically.
Would you rather do those?
No, it doesn't matter. Okay. Our current situation and need for the ordinance is that we don't currently have an ordinance that regulates special events that are larger than 50 people. Unplanned events put a strain on the borough resources such as police and emergency services, although that would treat. Public safety risks are likely due to unmanaged crowds or traffic or inadequate emergency planning, and unplanned events could cause disruptions to residents from noise, parking issues, or other event-related activities, although we do have ordinances that cover some of that. And also, unplanned events can place a financial burden on taxpayers if the borough must provide services without reimbursement.
I'd also just add, if I may, Councilperson Siegelmore, something that we've happened in recent years, which is a great problem to have, is we've had conflicting organizations wanting to do things at the same time. For example, we all remember our long discussion about two entities in the same month wanted to do an awareness with flags and light bulbs in different colors, and we could only let one organization. We also had a request to hang two different commemorative flags on the same flagpole on the same week one year. So having something like this may be helpful in working out better than a first come, first serve.
Thank you. So what the ordinance would cover is a permit requirement that events must apply 60 to 180 days in advance. Special services would be, Chief and Wes and Paula would look over if special services are required, such as traffic control, police, EMS, et cetera. The costs for those services, if needed, are borne by the event organizers, and a good faith estimate for the cost of those services would be provided to the event holder, and final reimbursement is required within 30 days of the invoice. The insurance is at $2 million liability. Wes, you can help me out if I'm saying that incorrectly, please. And responsibilities, organizers must comply with borough codes, and the police can revoke the permit for safety concerns if something, like there's an anomaly or somebody's not following what they said they were going to do in their permit application. And none of these fees are listed, are going to be listed in the ordinance. They would be in the fee schedule that we revise or revisit and publish yearly. Thank you. Who needs a permit? So there was some question about the last time we talked about this in the summertime. Events with 50-plus attendees would require a permit. Examples of those are parades, festivals, concerts, trade shows, etc. Exemptions are private residential gatherings, e.g. birthdays, graduations, etc., parties, garage sales, which is covered under another ordinance, funeral processions, and borough-sponsored events. Nothing out of the ordinary there. Organized protected activities are covered under 15-107, but also they require 72 advance notice required for organized activities. Spontaneous activities are exempt, so, if somebody starts to assemble, that's their right, as long as they're not blocking traffic, right? You're not allowed to block the road. The borough may propose alternative plans for safety, and again, we have an ordinance under 15-107, which people can refer to. So the point of having a special event ordinance is to regulate events that draw 50 or more people, ensure public safety during large events, protects the borough resources and finances. As you know, our police force is limited in our number of full-time officers and part-time officers, and to engage part-time officers for a large event, we need to ask them to plan time off from any full-time jobs they may have or other part-time jobs that they may have, which is more likely than not with our current officers. Planning an event would minimize disruptions to residents and provide a fair and consistent process for organizing. And that is a short summary of that giant document, which is basically Newtown Borough's event ordinance, but completely revised to reflect Yardley Borough. And I didn't know too with all those little question marks.
Chief Kelly and Mr. Forker, anything you'd like to add from your perspectives, as I know this directly impacts both of your positions?
I think if we take a moment and look back over the last couple of years, Yardley Borough has kind of become a destination for a lot of things. That's good. It's real good. It's a boon to our town, but it also brings certain headaches. How do we ensure that everyone has a safe and enjoyable visit? So this is something the chief and I have been kicking around quite a bit lately, and it is a concern. And I think this is a good step in getting us in that direction.
And a lot of the questions answered up here, ma'am, are questions that would come from the front table and from back here. This will put a stop to that, and everybody will be operating on one common platform. While these events have been increasing, the police department availability has been decreasing. We've seen a national downturn in interest in policing as a career. Until we get out of that, we're going to need some way to make sure that this borough is protected. And the only way to do that is by having advance notice where we can plan accordingly.
So I have a question. So how many unplanned 50 or more events have we been having on average? Or has that increased? I think the tannery has to get permits, right?
They do now. That was an example of an event that would have been required a permit. We did have to turn down one event about 2 years ago that would have been around the cusp of 50, could have been 40, could have been 50. It was a march. But the same day, we had another event already scheduled going on. We just didn't have the resources to staff both events at the same time. So, but last year, I was in discussions with someone who wanted to hold an event, and during our conversation, they said, well, I don't really need to speak to you because I'm gonna hold it on private property. And he was gonna have, a couple hundred people, hopefully, cross all his guests across the state road at 5 o'clock on a Friday. So, yeah, you kind of do need to involve the borough a little bit. So I was able to rein that in, but we don't want to see this continue, that mindset continue either. We don't want to put a burden on anyone holding an event that's going to bring people into our town. But we want it to be done purposefully, systematically, and safely.
Yeah, and I think to anyone who hasn't had someone, a vendor come for an event or something, 2 million liability insurance sounds exorbitant, but that's a pretty standard policy. We had a cookie decorator come to my office to do a class, and hers was like $5 million, and that was just standard. So I don't think it's an undue burden that we're placing. I do wonder what the appeal process would be if we had some sort of nonprofit or something that, either didn't meet the 60-day or just a special situation that comes up or doesn't have that liability insurance. What would that look like? Is there any exceptions to this at all?
I do think.
Obviously, council always has the right to grant or deny permission for use of its assets. But getting back to the insurance thing, when we started this process several months ago, I had a very long conversation with our insurance provider and asking him about, is this adequate? Should we bump it up for certain other events? Maybe events serving alcohol, we should require more. And he felt that the 2 million was perfectly in line, and there was really no benefit to kicking it up for one type of event or another.
And don't forget, in the absence of us having them secure this insurance, the borough becomes the insurer. So we do need to bear that in mind.
And there is a paragraph saying that we have the discretion to waive fees or reduce the required permit fees for the requirement for special services.
Thank you, I missed that.
Which we're already doing periodically under the assemblage ordinance.
The what is ordinance?
The assemblage.
Right. Any other questions?
Yeah, you mentioned fees, outside of, equipment and the cost of policing, so forth. Permitting fees, what does that mean?
I think we're envisioning a permit fee, something reasonable, $25. Because there's a lot of, as you know, David, there's a lot of time that goes into reviewing event plans and making sure things go off. If you're using the park, $10 a day for electric use, which is reasonable. There's nothing burdensome. It's just recouping some of the monies that the borough is currently spending and not recouping.
How does that affect, I'm just throwing stuff out on top of my mind. How does that affect, the farmer's market? They're there, they probably get over 50 people during the day. How does that work?
That was one that I tossed around quite a bit, and I figured the fairest way to do it is by the permit application. Another permit application runs from May to November. So it's obviously 30 weeks, 36 weeks. Not necessarily fair when you compare it to a one-day event, but there's no other fair way to do it. And you can't charge them for every day that they're there. But they would also be paying for the electric every time, but it all works out in the end. We're trying to make it as fair as possible.
I know that they donate money as well each year.
That's,
And I'm
Yeah.
picking on that particular event, that's just the one that came to mind.
sure.
Okay, well, it'd be interesting seeing what that fee schedule might look like.
I think it's just, I'm just saying, because from my understanding is that they pay the permit fee, the one-time permit fee. I thought we were talking about reserving parks, if you wanted to reserve the park, but that's a one-time. It's like Music Off Main is a one permit event.
Right, and the farmer's market. being
Halloween,
permit
whatever,
event.
yeah,
Right.
it covers the whole.
Right, but they're gonna pay for the utilities they use for each day. And I think some will compare to it. Beer Fest, that's a one-day event. And obviously, it's greater than 50 people, but they don't have any utility usage there.
So some of these events are already getting permits now, like the farmer's market, Music Off Main, they're already getting permits. So would it be fair to say that not a whole lot is changing other than they're going to be charged $10 for use of the electricity? Or is there more to it? Like, are they required to get the insurance now?
Somebody from surprising us on a Saturday morning, like
Sure.
having a large event that we weren't aware of.
We have a lot of submissions that go through us that come in like a week or even 4 days before a council
Oh,
meeting.
yeah, I know.
And we usually can pull it off, you know.
Right,
if we
right.
get the approvals through, you know, council, we can usually pull it off.
Gotcha.
But it also pulls me from doing other things.
This reminds me, Mr. Stump, of our recent instruction to redo the short-term lodging ordinance in the business district. We already have one. It's not well-written. It's not clear. This is clear, and, anyone who reads it can understand what is going on here.
But this also covers events like, say, in the back parking lot behind, like when they do their thing in the fall, behind where the nail salon,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
it covers events on
Tattoo
private property.
Self-care festival,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be covered.
Because it's open to the public.
It's open to the
That's
public,
but
right.
if it was a private, only by invite, then it wouldn't apply, correct?
If it was a birthday.
Depending on the number of people. Depending on the.
Well, that's not how I read it. It said that events that are open to the public.
It's public, yeah. It's not a trade show or anything. Trade show's not necessarily open to the public, but it's a large gathering. But yeah, like that, they get permits. Actually, they are coming back this year, September 7th. But, that also has traffic impacts. You have to look at that too, because we're closing off a parking lot and access on 2 streets. So, we're balancing things. But yeah,
This is mainly affects outdoor events, or am I mistaken?
well, we could have events that, at the community center that could be event triggers. And we did have a problem years ago at the community center with events because of parking. So we were able to bring them into the fold and work with them to make sure everything worked.
And we had one on a Friday night, 5 years ago, Mayor, that resulted in police action. And we didn't realize it was going on until 3 in the afternoon. And it was gonna go off at 7 o'clock at night and involved well over 150 plus
Yeah,
people inside.
yeah.
Where pyrotechnics were set off and it resulted,
Inside?
yes.
Yeah.
So this type of thing gives us that knowledge. that we can plan accordingly.
What could possibly go wrong? No, I'm just kidding.
Just a quick question about this public and numbers thing. You mentioned, without saying names and addresses, a situation where people were having something and people crossing a state road.
Yes,
That was not open to the public, correct?
that was,
That was?
it was, yeah.
Okay. Maybe we're talking about a different event. Oh, yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a couple of things. First, I appreciate the work that Kim and Michelle did and that Wes and Chief, that you've working to kind of get some organization under this, in this area. So I'm stepping into this with having done some due diligence, but not as much as used to. Ordinarily, I'd just be like, great, good with that. I trust the people who spent the most time on it. But some things came up that got me a little concerned. One of them is, it seems to me like the biggest threat, this doesn't really address the biggest threat, which is like an unplanned protest type of event that is, requires a lot of police service.
We have
Because
that
we-
ordinance.
We already have an ordinance on that.
But I mean, constitutionally, there's protected types of gatherings that we can't control no matter what we do, because I'm not against that. That's the reality that we have to face, right? That's probably the highest.
Except for what's in that current ordinance. That's not constitutionally protected. You can't close down a roadway.
Right, understood, right, and that's been tested. But there has been, a lot of litigation, ACLU and that kind of thing, against municipalities that pass various events requirement, because the question is, where's the balance between expression and a gathering? So when there's been those kind of issues of conflict, they've resulted in litigation, which is an issue we have to be aware of. It's a risk if we have an ordinance like this. Outside of that, our day-to-day operations and what we have experience with is all the events that we know and love, and as you said very well, Wes, we're happy that we have those events. We're happy that we live in a place that attracts that kind of thing and adds to the aliveness and the culture of our community. So, Carry the Load and Canaloween and Harvest Day and all those, wonderful events. So we have to strike this balance. We don't want to like overly, be too so restrictive that they can't really do it here. They choose somewhere else, and we don't want to be so lax that we end up with problems that we can't control. So I applaud the effort to organize this and to create policy around it in a way that we have more order. Although we've already been doing, as Jared said, we've already been doing, the permitting process. So we have some practice with it. My big question, which is the question I've asked before, and where I kind of struggle with this, is we're basically being asked to spend taxpayer money to create an ordinance to put all this in code. And some of these things are things that may change over time, which would then incur further expense. It's not clear to me what we get as an ordinance versus we've done this work, we have this framework, we now have a policy we could use. We do exactly the same thing. All the events have to go through 60 days, everything that's written there. And then we have to approve them just like we do. And if we don't do it as an ordinance, we just do that as a policy, then we can allow ourselves to evolve it. Maybe it turns out we need 90 days, maybe we need 45 days. I don't know. Maybe it's 50, maybe it's 75 people, maybe it's 25. There are things that maybe over time we'll learn. I don't see the risk in not having an ordinance and rushing to spend the money to do it now. That's the part where I'm kind of a bit.
Well, I don't think we're rushing. We've been working on this for a year, and we had a substantive conversation where you raised the same points in July, which I feel like there was a lot of work done to address them. So the big one I'm hearing is Mr. Forker that currently has no teeth at all. Someone says, you can't make me do that, and they're right. Like, if it's not law, it's not law. Right? I don't know. But I think so.
Well, does that?
I think you're correct, ma'am. If it's not law, there's nothing we can do. They're just going to say, I'm not going to do it, and that would breed more people to do that potentially. But the big part about this is not the enforcement end of it, in my mind. It helps us that we have that. The big part of this is it becomes an informational document that when somebody wants to know how to hold a special event in Yardley Borough, they can go to ordinances and look it up. I got a call a couple of months ago from somebody who was going to sell gold in the jewelry store wanting to get a permit. I said, you don't need that. Well, how would I know that? Well, you can't unless there's an ordinance that deals with this. And for the rare time when somebody violates it, we're going to need that. We're going to need that, the teeth of the law to enforce it.
It also helps allocate resources in advance rather than somebody just showing, like, we have, now somebody's having an event, but we didn't know about it, and now what? We have our 1 or 2 police officers on duty, and that's it, because we didn't know.
I do think as a borough, we need to get in the habit of going through annual ordinance revisions wherein we could pay once to advertise and update 16 different places where we have outdated information that needs updating. Like it's scary if you read through some of our code. Like, it hasn't been touched in a really long time, and it needs to be looked at and updated. So that's definitely something we could do, because that could be said of anything we pass, really. It quickly becomes obsolete.
Yeah, well, there are certain things that I'm trying to get when I've heard this thing about teeth, but like, has that ever happened that somebody has an event and you say, well, you have to go through, get an event permit, right? I mean, if they haven't, you can't stop someone from doing something illegal, whether it's a policy or not, but has it ever happened that somebody said, well, forget that, I'm not doing your event thing, I'm just going to do it anyway? Has that ever happened?
Isn't that what you were just
This is what, that's what we're trying to prevent.
2 years ago, it was the weekend of the Friends Flea Market. We had a bike race come through town. We had 100 bikes come racing through town. We didn't know about it. We had 1 police officer, and he had to be in 2 intersections at one time. Charlie's a tall guy, but he's not that tall. And he had trouble. And I was able to rein that event in, and now, she's the first one that reached out to me in January. This is the date I'd like to have my race. Okay.
Right. No, I think there's 2 different things here. I understand the need to know in advance, the need to have it organized and all. I understand all that part, but I suspect that bike race group didn't know. That's because of a lack of information on our part of when you have an event, or a lack of resourcefulness on their part to find out if they need a permit to run through a town. I think that's a problem we have either way, In other words, I'm really trying to get to what are we getting for our money here by making an ordinance as opposed to having it be our policy? That's
Policy without an ordinance.
and I'm convincible. I'm just struggling with it.
I don't think
because I
that
want
you,
to-
I don't think it necessarily has to be something that you need to convince someone on. It's a matter of preference, whether you want something codified in our code or you don't.
I would like to see an ordinance on it for safety issues. At least we have something on the books to protect us and protect our society,
And I don't think
people in
it's-
town.
Right, I agree with you, and that also, clearly, it's not like an outlier, because I had Tullytown, Morrisville, Newtown, New Hope, they all have event ordinances, so it's not some, it seems pretty standard and a lot of similarly sized communities.
And I think that, something that might be a good thing to do is just reach out to them. I think we have, actually, when we asked for the ordinance from one of them, we had an email from them, like, how has this been? Have there been any issues? Has it been helpful? What are you, I'll go to you next, Councilperson Carlson. Are we looking to vote on the ordinance tonight?
I think we
It's not
should-
really to advertise, it's a discussion, right?
Right, whether to have, I guess the next step is Andrew.
Have Andrew work on it. Okay, go ahead.
A question I would have is, could we get at one of the issues that Ori's talking about here? In other words, you have an ordinance that calls out just the key things, how far ahead and what definition of event is basically. But there's a lot of other detail in here. And it must be done in accordance with the current event policy, bump, 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 dated, whatever. So that someone goes in there and they see, oh, I got time, I got 60 days before I got to do something. I know whether my event is an event or not.
Yeah.
Get those two definitions, and then, well, what else do I have to do? Then they go to the policy, and you have all this stuff in the policy. Then you wouldn't run into the next year, there's one paragraph in here.
And you could put the fine
Excuse
in
us.
you could put the fine in the ordinance. That way, if you don't follow the policy, this is the fine. That way.
So then you have a really basic ordinance to cover you on the law
Can
side.
you do that?
I don't know.
I've never seen a policy reference in an ordinance come to mind, and I wonder if it has to be like a self-referencing document in some way, or,
I don't know.
Well,
That's a
it.
really good
So let's do the
question. Yeah.
because that would be a lot easier
yeah,
for us to
make it one
and
page.
give us some flexibility.
I think that would also benefit us a lot because when we had the issue a year ago with people opening up Airbnbs and getting cease and desist letters and reaching out and going, do I actually have to shut this down? There were people that pointed to our ordinances and said, well, this says tourist home. I don't have a tourist home, I have an Airbnb. And I mean, granted, it's semantics. We had our position that we took, but to Mr. Carlson's point, if we're able to, the ordinance points to a policy that then we can update as things evolve and change, and we can update it like very quickly in-house and not have to pay thousands of dollars to update it. Because,
It could be done on the spot.
well, like what Caroline said, if you go through our ordinances and really start to read them, all 800 pages of them, there's some stuff in there that it's like, yeah, that hasn't been touched in a couple decades. So,
I would be much more comfortable with something like that if it's
So
possible.
can you ask, can we ask Andrew that question? Are we comfortable with him spending some time researching that? Because I'd like to know for other things, honestly, that would be a nice thing to do.
Could you just repeat it? Because I.
So, the ordinance would be pretty bare bones. We have an events ordinance. We require you to get insurance, but it wouldn't state like the amount of insurance or like, it would state the amount of time, but not like the fee schedule. And then the policy would have all of those specifics that we could just update.
We could update
But
that.
the ordinance would stay the ordinance.
I mean, if we could do that with the fees, can't we do that with the other aspects? You would think, right? Because fees are like
yeah.
a big part.
I think it's a
So,
great idea.
Like we do with the building fees, right?
and then that
To
also,
reference them to a fee schedule is,
So you
but
reference.
the fee schedule is signed off on by the council, yeah.
So if he comes back, do we have consensus that they can go and ask that?
The question.
And if
Yeah.
they come back, if he comes back, Solicitor Griffin, and says, yes, we would want to break it then, redraft it in-house so that it would be less work for Curtin and Hefner to do for us, with like bare bones, and then move most of this over into a policy. Does that make sense?
Do we draft our own ordinances often?
We do the first drafts, and we like to give it over to Curtin and Hefner as drafted as possible, because it saves money.
Right,
And then they do the fine tweaking.
right. So that's what we're,
So at this time, we're just authorizing communication to go back and forth on like if we're able to reference a policy. Because if he says no, then we're back to this, and we'll vote for him to draft it at the next meeting and see if we have 4 votes. Sound good?
Sounds good to me.
All right, anything else for the good of the order this evening? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned at 9:12.